Pamela Cahanes' life took a tragic turn after her enrollment in the Navy, culminating in a tragic mystery that remained unsolved for decades. But what led to Pamela's untimely demise? Join us as we delve into the riveting tale of Pamela Cahanes and the relentless pursuit of justice by her grieving family and determined investigators. What secrets will the investigation unveil, and what lingering questions remain unanswered even after the verdict? Stay tuned to discover how this harrowing story unfolds, reminding us that even the most perplexing cold cases can be resolved through perseverance. Pamela Cahanes was born in 1958 into a close-knit family on a dairy farm in the peaceful city of Stillwater, Minnesota. Pamela, being the second youngest of 8 siblings, had her childhood surrounded by affection and the simple joys of farm life. As Pamela grew older, she developed a desire for adventures outside of her comfort zone. At the age of 25, she made a life-changing decision, motivated by a passion to explore the world and serve her nation, to enlist in the United States Navy. In pursuit of her destiny, Pamela left her hometown of Minnesota and moved to Central Florida, where in May 1984 she started a new chapter of her life at the Orlando Naval Training Center. Being raised on a family farm, she possessed an innate work ethic and discipline that served her well throughout the demanding training program in the Navy. On August 3, 1984, Pamela enthusiastically graduated from the Naval Training Center after finishing her 2 months of training. The fulfillment over her accomplishment, though, did not last long. On August 4, 1984, the following day, Pamela's bright future took a terrible turn. Her last known sighting had been reported at Orlando's Fashion Square Mall, where she bought bathroom supplies and cosmetics from a Kmart. Subsequently, detectives found a receipt with a timestamp of 3:18 p.m., which provided essential details about her last known activity. Later that evening, around 6:30 and 7 p.m., Pamela was seen strolling along with an unknown male close to the Naval Training Center. It was reported that they were spotted at a bar on the Navy base, Club Mariner. The mystery surrounding the anonymous guy continued to elude detectives, further complicating the tragic events that had transpired. On August 5, 1984, Pamela Cahanes' body was found, partially naked and lifeless, next to a vacant house on Riverview Avenue in Sanford. Given how brutally she died, it seemed as though her life had been snatched and then mercilessly thrown away. Thereafter, a generic receipt without any identifiable information discovered at the crime site significantly changed the course of the investigation. This mysterious receipt listed a purchase that was made at 1:09 a.m., purportedly from a Chinese restaurant. Pamela Cahanes' sudden death stunned her family to their core, causing them to cope for 34 long years with grief and unanswered questions. The initial investigation had been tough, and the officers were unable to identify a culprit or understand the motive behind this horrible act. Given the offender's close proximity to the Naval Training Center, authorities surmised that he may have had ties to the military base. The Seminole County Sheriff's Department worked tirelessly. However, they were unable to come up with any crucial lead, and the case went cold for decades. The decades, though, did not lessen Pamela's family's commitment to pursue justice for their beloved sister. They faced dead ends and depressing situations in their search for answers, but they never gave up hope. Finally, advances in forensic technology resulted in a breakthrough. In an unexpected turn of events, Pamela's family was contacted by an officer from the Seminole County Sheriff's Department who set up a face-to-face meeting in Minnesota. The family assembled, expecting routine updates on the case, but they had no idea what major disclosures lay ahead of them. The family was shown a video footage by the detectives that depicted a suspect named Thomas Lewis Garner being taken into custody. The 59-year-old dental hygienist who was employed alongside Pamela Cahanes at the Orlando Naval Training Center was arrested on suspicion of first-degree murder. The arrest took place in Jacksonville, where Garner had been living for a number of years. For the Cahanes family, The arrest reflected the start of a new chapter, but it also raised a lot of unanswered questions. Why he committed the crime remained a mystery, as did the details connecting Garner and Pamela to the naval training environment. After appearing in court, Garner was confronted with the seriousness of the charges filed against him and the possibility of serving out the rest of his life in prison. The inventive utilization of genealogical databases and DNA testing was what led to the case's conclusion. By using the public genealogy website GEDmatch, investigators were able to create a DNA family tree that ultimately pointed them to Thomas Lewis Garner. Investigators were able to match Garner's DNA with evidence that had been retained from the 1984 crime scene, thanks to ongoing surveillance of him, as well as the recovery of a personal item. Following decades of ambiguity, the Cahanes family finally felt hopeful again after Thomas Garner's arrest in 2019. This marked a turning point in the cold case. Throughout the trial, Thomas Garner entered the witness stand to defend himself. He acknowledged that he might have had a brief sexual relationship with Pamela a few years before, but he firmly denied having anything to do with her tragic passing. Garner's defense team intended to discredit the prosecution's case by providing another perspective that dissociates him from the offense. After a lot of speculation, the jury found Thomas Garner guilty in the long-awaited resolution of the cold case. Garner was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole after his conviction, which put an end to a tedious proceeding that lasted for almost 4 decades. Immediately following the announcement of the verdict, Pamela Cahanes' sister, speaking on behalf of the family, made an emotional statement in the open courtroom. She conveyed a range of emotions, highlighting her hope that Garner would reflect on the time he had to himself, whilst her family had been grieving. Even if the sentencing brings some closure, the decades of suffering the family went through without justice cannot be entirely erased. Thomas Garner is reportedly being looked into as a possible suspect in another cold case, according to investigators. His DNA was allegedly found matching with evidence from a 1982 Honolulu killing that involved a 25-year-old lady. Actual charges against Garner in this case have not yet been made, but prosecutors have brought up the likelihood that he may have more victims. There was conjecture that Garner might be a serial felon, which led to more investigation into his possible involvement in other unresolved crimes. The apprehension and conviction of Thomas Lewis Garner related to the brutal slaying of Pamela Cahanes bears witness to the tenacity of the investigators pursuing justice, as well as the developments in the field of forensic science. Pamela's journey, which started with a young woman pursuing adventure and obligation to her country, ended tragically, leaving behind an unforgettable impact on her family. This tragic case serves as a reminder that despite the passage of time, even the most challenging cold cases can be solved by devoted investigators and advances in forensic technology. Pamela Cahanes' legacy may continue to be a symbol of persistence and fortitude in the face of adversity. After nearly 4 decades of agony and uncertainty, the Cahanes family finally finds a semblance of closure with the conviction of the suspect in Pamela's murder. Yet amidst the relief, unsettling questions linger. What drove Thomas Garner to commit such a heinous act, and are there more victims tied to his dark past? As Pamela's family grapples with the aftermath of the trial, a new chilling revelation emerges: Garner's potential involvement in another unsolved case. Could this be the tip of the iceberg, hinting at a much larger, more sinister pattern? Join the conversation by sharing your thoughts and theories in the comments below. What do you believe motivated Garner's actions, and do you think justice has truly been served? Stay tuned for updates on this evolving saga as the truth behind Pamela Cahanes' tragic fate continues to unravel. In 1984, Maryann Bagenstose disappeared from her home, leaving behind her son and estranged husband, Jerry. Despite investigations, no trace of her was found. Fast forward to 2022, forensic analysis had a breakthrough in 1984. Yet, Maryann's body remains missing. Will justice finally prevail in this decades-old mystery? What could have happened to Maryann after all these years? On June 5, 1984, Maryann Bagenstose went missing from her house on West Willow Road. When Maryann Bagenstose, then 25 years old, moved out of her divorced husband Jerry's house in June 1984, she started living at 25 West Willow Road with her 2-year-old son, whom she shared with Jerry, and a boarder she was seeing. That year, in April, Maryann received the custody of her son. But on June 15th, an official custody hearing was set to take place. Maryann was said to be a loving mother to her kid, who, according to others, could never have abandoned her. Jer was granted the custody of their son after Maryann failed to show up for the court hearing. The last person to see Maryann alive was her estranged husband, Jerry. Since the day she vanished, Maryann hasn't gotten in touch with any of her friends or relatives. On June 7, 1984, Maryann's mother reached the law enforcement to report that her daughter hadn't been back home in 2 days, sparking the start of the inquiry into Maryann's disappearance. Jerry never filed a missing persons report for his kid's mother. Jer, who spoke with police several times, said he had last seen Maryann alive on June 5, 1984, when he came to the house early that day to take Maryann to trade in her car. According to Jerry, Maryann wasn't ready to go, so he drove his son to Long's Park. Upon his return, he said Maryann was gone and had left a message saying she was headed to Turkey Hill on Willow Street, and he hadn't heard back from her ever since. On June 8, 1984, Jerry was inquired by a Piquia Township police officer at his West Willow Roadhouse. When the officer searched his garage, he unearthed a piece of cardboard covering recently dug dirt. Once the cardboard was raised, he noticed about a 3-by-5-foot dug-up area. In response to these findings, a search warrant was issued and carried out on June 13, 1984. When the garage's hole was opened for a second time, it was 3 feet by 6 feet and about 5 feet deep. Still, there was no indication of Maryann's body. On June 13, 1984, nevertheless, while the detectives were executing the search warrant, they came across a note. The note, which said, "Had to run a quick errand, be right back," was discovered crumbled inside a wooden nail keg in the living room next to the couch. It was taken and kept at PSP Lancaster as evidence. Included in the affidavit of probable cause are several pieces of evidence that were obtained and deemed credible during the course of the inquiry. Records retrieved from Jer's workplace revealed that he had an unspecified absence on June 5, 1984, the same day Maryann went missing. Jer's left arm was bandaged over an injury that wasn't old. He gave conflicting accounts to the police about how and where he got the injury. Regarding the contents of Maryann's note, why he dug a hole in his garage just a few days after the victim disappeared, why he was at the house that day, and what Maryann was doing when he showed up, Jer gave authorities a number of inconsistent statements. The defendant hypothesized that Maryann was having trouble with her car and walked into a store. Questions with the victim's neighbors and associates suggested that the car was in excellent working condition during the days preceding her disappearance. According to Turkey Hill's assistant manager, Maryann was not present at the store on the day of her disappearance. During the search warrant, Jerry acknowledged to the police that he only presumed Maryann went to Turkey Hill, and the note did not specify that she was heading there. A picture of the defendant's car was shown to a maintenance supervisor at Long's Park, who claimed that on June 5, 1984, he hadn't seen that car in the park. The car wasn't recognized by the other 2 workers either. In 1985, Jer informed detectives that he had received reports from individuals claiming to have seen Maryann recently. The defendant never informed the authorities about this. The defendant never provided the authorities with the several notes and postcards that were allegedly sent to Jer by Maryann. According to witnesses, Maryann seemed happy and waiting to get a new car right before she vanished. Late in 2018, Pennsylvania State Police investigators reopened this case with a primary focus on a note retrieved during the search warrant execution on June 13, 1984, at the West Willow Roadhouse. To find public records and other material with the defendant's writing, investigators combed through online databases. Following this preliminary data collection, a search warrant was issued for the same residence on September 20, 2022. Numerous things purportedly bearing the suspect's handwriting were seized by cops. Investigator-collected written samples were sent for forensic examination to the Pennsylvania State Police Bureau of Forensic Services, Harrisburg Regional Laboratory. The examination compared the handwriting on the note that was allegedly retrieved by authorities on June 13, 1984, with the objects that were taken on September 20, 2022, in order to determine her whereabouts. The report's findings confirmed that Jerry Bagenstose was the writer of the note that was found by the police in 1984. This investigation has lasted for decades, but Maryann's body has never been found. To prove that this is not a case of a missing person, investigators pointed out the following elements. Since her disappearance, the victim has not been in touch with any of her family members or acquaintances. The victim has not been found despite several searches of federal, police, and open-source databases. There is no indication that the victim packed anything to travel or leave the house. Neither has the victim withdrawn any cash nor opened any bank accounts. The victim's social security number and credentials have not been used. There is no evidence that the victim ever carried a passport, acquired legal identification in another state, or left the country. District Attorney Heather Adams of Lancaster County stated, "I want to thank Troopers Roberts, McNally, Corporal McCurdy, and all of the investigators who have dedicated countless time and effort into this case, as well as attorneys in my office. We hope that this provides comfort to Maryann's family and friends as the legal procedure in this 38-year-old case commences. We'll make every effort to ensure that this case is handled properly." After decades of twists and turns, the case of Maryann Bagenstose remains shrouded in mystery. Despite compelling evidence linking her husband, Jer, to her disappearance, Maryann's body has never been found. Now, as investigators continue to unravel the truth behind this chilling cold case, one question lingers. What truly happened to Maryann on that fateful day in 1984? Will justice finally be served, or are there still dark secrets waiting to be unearthed? Your insights and theories are invaluable. Share them in the comments below and stay tuned for further updates and discoveries on the Maryann Bagenstose case. In 1981, Sonia Carmen Stone was tragically killed in her Monterey County home, leaving behind her young daughter. The case went cold for decades until new DNA evidence surfaced in 2020, leading to the arrest of a suspect. Join us as we delve into the twists and turns of this long unsolved mystery. Who was actually the perpetrator, and what finally led to his arrest? How did investigators finally connect the dots to solve this cold case? And what does his conviction mean for Sonia's family and the community? Stay tuned for the full story. In 1981, Sonia Carmen Stone, a 30-year-old mother of one, resided in Monterey County, California, with her 4-year-old daughter. She was employed at Levi Strauss & Cohen as a sales agent and merchandiser. On October 15, 1981, Sonia's friend Caroline McBride arrived at her house, knocking the front door. As Sonia did not respond, McBride went inside anyway. At that moment, she discovered Sonia's partially naked body lying across the living room's floor. She appeared to have been choked with a pair of pantyhose. From the crime scene, detectives gathered several specimens of DNA in order to use them later. They then made the decision to draw up a timeline of the incident. They suspected that the incident transpired during the time when her young daughter was attending school. When her body was discovered, it was almost midday. Shortly after the slaying, a guy reported to the police of a friend of his who confessed to being in Sonia's home on the morning she was killed. The friend's name was Michael Glazebrook, and he was a neighbor of Sonia's. A day after the crime was committed, investigators made the decision to speak with him. They noticed he had a cut on his face and that he was very anxious. In relation to the case, he was taken into custody on December 18, 1981. During his 1983 trial, the jury was unable to reach a unanimous decision about his culpability or innocence. In the aftermath of a mistrial, the prosecution dropped the case. DNA analysis was still in its infancy in the early 1980s. Blood had been recovered from under Sonia's fingernails, and the only thing the lab experts could determine about it was that it wasn't hers. Investigators made the decision to revisit the case in 2020. They conducted additional tests on the DNA evidence they had gathered in 1981. Consequently, they succeeded in creating a DNA profile. They took a sample of Michael Glazebrook's DNA whilst they maintained their suspicions regarding his involvement. Following additional testing, Michael Glazebrook was found to be the one who took Sonia's life. In August 2021, 65-year-old Glazebrook was apprehended from his Seaside, California residence. The fact that he served as a school bus driver is really frightening. Glazebrook ended up being detained in the Monterey County Jail on a $1 million bond. On February 8, 2023, Michael Glazebrook was declared guilty of the crime. He is due to be sentenced on April 26 and might receive a life term without the chance of release. After decades of uncertainty and heartache, the case of Sonia Carmen Stone's tragic death finally saw a resolution with the arrest and conviction of Michael Glazebrook. The revelation of new DNA evidence in 2020 shed light on the long unsolved mystery, leading investigators to Glazebrook, who had been a neighbor of Sonia's at the time of her death. Despite a mistrial in 1983, advancements in DNA analysis ultimately connected Glazebrook to the crime scene, culminating in his conviction in 2023. However, questions still linger. What was Glazebrook's motive? How did he evade justice for so long? Join the discussion and share your thoughts on this chilling case. What other mysteries lie hidden in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered? Leave your comments below, and let's continue to seek justice and closure for victims and their families. A historic cold case is solved after nearly 34 years, with both the victim and the killer identified through forensic genealogy for the first time in the country. Stacey Chahorski, reported missing in 1989, was found sexually assaulted and strangled near a highway. Throughout the case's investigation, there had been multiple people of interest, but all of them had been ruled out via DNA evidence, until 2024, when Stacey's family finally received closure when her killer was identified. Forensic genealogy played a crucial role in connecting the dots and bringing justice after decades. But how did authorities manage to crack this case after so long? What challenges did they face along the way? The picture of Stacey that Detective Joe Montgomery holds is an old black and white photocopy. "It was quite overwhelming," stated Agent Montgomery. However, this photo filled in a great deal of the gaps for the agent who handled her case for almost a decade without ever knowing her name or identity. "I find it to be amazing, because you live with such cases every day as an agent," he remarked. In January 1989, 4 months following her last known sighting, Stacey Chahorski was formally declared missing. Chahorski had called her mother to let her know that she intended to hitchhike from her current location in North Carolina to her home state of Michigan, specifically to the cities of Muskegon and Flint. The victim's body was found in Dade County, Georgia, close to Rising Fawn, on the east side of northbound I-59, about 5 miles from the state borders of Georgia and Alabama. Before being identified, it was speculated that the victim might have been a hitchhiker. She had been strangled and subjected to sexual assault, as per the autopsy findings. Samuel Little, a serial murderer, admitted to the slaying of Patricia Parker in Dade County, but was exonerated in this case because of DNA evidence. According to a Radford University article, Larry Dwayne Hall, another serial murderer, was also listed as a person of interest in this case. It has been reported that Hall is allegedly accountable for the disappearance of up to 45 women between the 80s and 90s. Many of Hall's alleged victims were girls who had been sexually assaulted and discovered close to Civil War memorials. He ended up in a federal prison in North Carolina after abducting and killing Jessica Roach in 1993. This victim's mutilation and discovery close to a Civil War memorial were also mentioned in the report. Yet this information cannot be verified by other sources. Her age range was changed to 25 to 35 in 2019. Before this, she was believed to be as young as 16 and possibly a runaway. The DNA was added to the missing persons database in 2005 under the name Jane Doe. Her homicide was handed over to the Cold Case Unit in 2015. It wasn't until March of this year, almost 34 years after Stacey passed away, Agent Montgomery got the chance to inform her family that she had been identified via forensic genealogy. Her killer was also identified in the same manner late last month. "I spoke to Stacey's mother last week to let her know who the killer was, and she of course got really upset," he stated. The GBI announced on Tuesday that Hoss Wise, also known as Henry Frederick Wise, had been identified as Stacey Chahorski's killer using familial DNA. He hauled a truck across the Southeast. He also performed as a stunt driver in South Carolina. He passed away while performing a stunt at Myrtle Beach Speedway in 1999 and burned to a crisp, stated Montgomery. According to investigators, he regularly passed through Chattanooga, Birmingham, and Nashville. GBI Special Agent Joe Montgomery pointed out that this was a direct path to the location where Chahorski's body was discovered. Chattanooga is located in the northeast close to Dade County. According to Montgomery, Wise had relatives in Georgia and alternated between living in the Carolinas and Florida. Authorities added that Wise had a violent past in Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina that included theft, assault, and obstruction of a police officer. Wise's arrests preceded the mandated DNA analysis following a felony arrest, before he could face punishment for slaying Stacey. Unfortunately, Wise passed away. He passed away 23 years before Stacey's identity had become known. FBI Special Agent in charge Carrie Farley stated, "It was traced back. Wise had a living relative who was questioned, complied, and it was matched to Wise." The DNA of the culprit or the victim's surviving relatives is used in forensic genealogy. But according to Agent Montgomery, connecting the dots requires investigation. It's like another lead to run down. It establishes a profile, but then you have to go through different family members, and it's almost like a tree, and you're working your way back to the trunk, Agent Montgomery explained. In this case, he added that the limbs of that tree lead back to Henry Hoss Wise and Stacey Chahorski. They created this picture. It just sits and sits and sits. And then when something comes through, it's like, wow, it's just really overwhelming, he implied. As the case of Stacey Lyn Chahorski's murder finally reaches its conclusion after 34 years, there's a lingering sense of closure mixed with unanswered questions. While forensic genealogy has brought some solace to her family by identifying both the victim and the killer, the fact that Henry Frederick Wise, also known as Hoss Wise, died before facing justice leaves a bittersweet taste. Yet the journey doesn't end here. What drove Wise to commit such a heinous act? Were there other victims? And most importantly, are there more cold cases waiting to be unraveled with the same method? Your insights and thoughts could help shed light on these mysteries. Share your comments and join the discussion as we delve deeper into the complexities of this historic case. If you find this video compelling, show your support by giving it a thumbs up, subscribing to our channel, and ringing that notification bell. By doing so, you'll stay updated about the latest investigations and mysteries. Your support means the world to us as we continue to pursue the truth in the world of unsolved cases.